Darkness had fallen over the Earth. But the darkness was just an illusion. Have you ever wondered, what if humanity was wrong to believe it's the most advanced, the most intelligent species? What if someone, or something, was watching us the whole time, waiting? Not because we were special, but because we were dangerous. We used to look at the stars in awe. Now, we've reached them. But in doing so, we woke something up. Something older. Something afraid. Something angry. It all began in the year 2093. The mission was called Project Ascendancy. For the first time, a human crew landed on the outskirts of the Andromeda Galaxy. The media called it a contact mission. Celebrations, parades, endless applause. But behind those headlines was a silence only space could hear. Dr. Layla Rami, the mission's xenobiologist, wrote in her log, "There's something here. We think we're alone, but this isn't the sound of solitude. It's breathing." Their first mistake, assuming everything could be understood. They discovered a black obelisk, 10 feet tall, half buried in alien soil. No markings. No energy signatures. Just presence. It didn't react. Until she touched it. At first, nothing happened. A cold wave passed through her hand. That was all. But the next day, the crew began to change. Commander J. Park started clawing at the inside of his helmet, as if something under his skin needed to be freed. Engineer Malik screamed himself awake every night, crying, "Am I still alive? Why?" Their eyes began to shift. Not blue or brown anymore, but violet, nearly black, like nebulae swallowing starlight. And then the voice came. No one could understand the language, but they all heard it. "You brought it back. You woke it up." Contact with Earth dropped instantly. No signals out. No messages in. Just silence. But the worst part, the crew didn't care anymore. Layla recorded again. "I don't think we're exploring space. I think we're coming home." Their bodies changed next. Skin turned semi-transparent, like something beneath was glowing. Fingers grew longer, splitting like claws. Tongues forked. Bones cracked in unfamiliar patterns. But the most horrifying transformation, their memories. They began forgetting Earth. The smell of rain. The feel of skin. Their own names. All they remembered was the obelisk and the thing inside it. Because the obelisk wasn't a relic. It was a seed. And humans were just its carriers. This wasn't a virus. It was a reminder. A buried truth. We weren't born on Earth. We were planted. Designed. Layla, Malik, Jay. They weren't human anymore. They weren't even alive in the way we understand it. And in that terrifying clarity came the final revelation. We do not find cosmic horrors. We are the cosmic horror. It started with whispers, not in their ears, but in the marrow of their bones. Layla could feel it first. The pulse of something ancient thrumming through her skeleton, like a song made of screams, encoded not in words, but in gravity. She no longer needed air. She no longer needed food. She stood for hours outside the ship, her bare face against the vacuum of space, eyes wide and unblinking, watching the black like it was a mirror. Because it was. Jay stopped speaking altogether. He would sit in the ship's observation bay, etching incomprehensible glyphs into the walls with his own fingernails, which had hardened into something more like obsidian claws. The language he carved glowed faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of their mutated heartbeats. Even the ship's AI couldn't translate it. It only responded with one repeated phrase. Origin recognized. Encryption irrelevant. Welcome, architects. Architects. Not explorers. Not invaders. Architects. That word echoed through Layla's thoughts, and with each repetition, something else unraveled. Memories not her own began to surface. Not from childhood, not from Earth, but from before Earth. Before time. Before galaxies had cooled into form. She remembered being a swarm of light, suspended in the void, weaving solar systems like a potter spins clay. She remembered seeding planets. She remembered humanity, not as an accident, but as a trigger. Earth was never a cradle. It was a fuse, and it had been lit. The obelisk was not the first. Across the galaxy, similar constructs were awakening. Layla saw them in dreams or visions, rising from beneath Martian dust, emerging from Saturn's icy rings, blooming like obsidian flowers across moons no one had dared name. Each one pulsed the same message across the void. The architects return. The cycle resumes. And with that cycle came change. Malik's body was the first to transcend. He didn't die. He shed. Flesh peeled from his body like a discarded suit, revealing something beneath. A mass of glimmering tendrils, eyes that blinked sideways across his limbs, a geometry that folded in on itself, impossible to comprehend. He whispered, before his voice turned to static. I thought we were chasing aliens. We are the memory of aliens. We are the weapon left behind. Back on Earth, strange things began to occur. Telescopes detected gravitational shifts in deep space, where no mass should exist. People began reporting dreams, shared dreams, of towering structures in void-lit deserts, of skies split open by spirals of screaming stars. And then, across every radio frequency on the planet, the same phrase transmitted at once. Humanity is a message, and the universe has started to read it. Panic erupted, but it was already too late. Because the truth wasn't just in space. It was in us. The DNA we once thought was junk wasn't. It was a lockbox. A code hidden within the double helix, waiting for the right frequency, the right signal, the right touch. And Project Ascendancy was the key. Layla floated now, not in space, but in something deeper. She was no longer bound by her body. She remembered what she had always been. A carrier, a trigger, a beacon. And now awakened, she could see what others could not. Earth was never alone. It was surrounded, not by ships, but by watchers, by harvesters, by the rest of us. They had waited eons, watching us evolve, build, destroy, rebuild. They didn't interfere because they didn't need to. They were waiting for contact, not to reach out, but to receive the signal we would inevitably send. And now, it had begun. Layla, no longer bound by time, stared back through the veil of the cosmos. She could feel others awakening, other humans shedding their skin, remembering the true form they once wore, before matter, before biology, before planets. And from the dark edge of the universe, something stirred. Not in anger, not in joy, but in recognition. Because now, the architects had returned. The sleepers had awakened. The horrors were home. The Earth didn't explode. It didn't crack open. There were no firestorms or alien fleets descending from the sky. What happened was quieter. Much quieter. Like the moment a dream turns to a nightmare, so soft, you don't even realize it's happening. At first, it was just changes in behavior. People staring at the stars a little too long. Children drawing spiral shapes over and over again. Astronauts on the ISS who suddenly refused to return. And the animals, whales beaching themselves in coordinated patterns that resembled constellations no one had ever mapped. In Antarctica, a research team went silent. Days later, they re-emerged, naked, barefoot, eyes black and mouths filled with black sand. They said nothing. Just stood in formation, heads tilted to the sky, waiting. For what? No one knew. But Layla did. Or, what had once been Layla. She drifted in a space between thoughts, between light and matter. Her consciousness spread like a network, touching satellites, deep-sea cables, dormant DNA, long-buried instincts. She could feel them all now, humanity's sleeping pieces waking up, like a chorus slowly rising from silence. This wasn't infection. It was revelation. Every human on Earth was a fragment of a forgotten mind. Billions of pieces of a shattered consciousness, scattered across the stars and compressed into carbon and bone. The obelisks were not prisons. They were reminders. Keys to unlock what lay dormant. And Earth, our precious blue world, was simply where those pieces were hidden. Now, they were reconnecting. Across oceans, languages, and time zones, people began to say the same phrase in unison, in dreams, in sleepwalking whispers. We remember the before. We are not one. We are the many. World governments scrambled. Networks collapsed. Faiths fractured. Old religions tried to explain the phenomenon as prophecy. Scientists argued it was a mass psychosis event triggered by cosmic radiation. But it didn't matter, because by the time they understood it, they had already joined it. What had become of him, descended into Jupiter's atmosphere in a makeshift vessel composed of metals unknown to Earth's periodic table. He wasn't seeking data. He was returning. And beneath those impossible storms, he found it. A gate. Not a wormhole. Not a black hole. But something far worse. An eye. It opened when it saw him. And Jay, no longer bound by time or form, whispered into its event horizon. The signal has reached critical mass. They remember. Begin integration. Earth's moon began to hum. No one had ever thought to ask why the moon was perfectly locked in place. Why it never showed its dark side. Why its density didn't match that of natural satellites. Now they knew. The moon wasn't a rock. It was a receiver. And it had just turned on. All across the planet, people dropped to their knees, not in fear, not in agony, but in recognition. Their blood hummed. Their eyes glazed. Their hearts began to beat in perfect synchrony. And in that collective silence, the Earth itself began to change frequency. The sky flickered. Stars rearranged themselves. And the voice returned, no longer distant, no longer alien, but intimate. You are not alone. You never were. You were us, forgetting. Layla saw the surface of Earth from beyond its orbit now. Not as a planet, but as a circuit board. Oceans as conduits. Cities as neural hubs. Forests as memory. It was never designed to evolve. It was designed to awaken. And now, it had. Every moment of war, love, suffering, growth, every poem, death, betrayal, birth, was not a random pattern of human experience. It was programming. And now, the final command had been executed. Initiate reassembly. From black holes to comets, distant watchers stirred. All pieces of the same ancient intelligence. All drifting back toward one central idea, one singular, unspeakable truth. Humanity was not life. It was a vessel. And now, the vessel remembered what it truly was. The question was never, are we alone? The question was, what happens when we remember that we never wanted to be? ChatGPT said. The transformation accelerated. Not in loud eruptions or chaos, but with eerie coordination, like every human mind was suddenly syncing to an ancient rhythm embedded deep within their DNA. Governments no longer had authority. Borders became meaningless. Language barriers dissolved overnight. People began to see each other, truly see. Not the faces, not the bodies, but the echoes behind their eyes. The echoes of what they once were. Entire cities began to hum, low, vibrating tones that made birds fall from the sky and machines glitch out. The planet's magnetic field pulsed with unfamiliar harmonics. Scientists tried to map it, until they started hearing the tone in their dreams, and then stopped speaking altogether. The International Space Station was gone. Not destroyed. Absorbed. Its crew vanished without a trace. In its place, a shimmering veil hovered in orbit, pulsating like a heartbeat, leaking dimensional shadows that bled through lenses but not the naked eye. Astronomers stared at it for too long. Their eyes turned silver. They began drawing maps of star systems that didn't exist, or hadn't existed yet. Layla drifted among them now, not above Earth, but within its pulse. Her body was long gone. What remained was will. Memory. Consciousness. A thread in a network that stretched across time, galaxies, and even dimensions. She no longer needed form. She was form. And her purpose was awakening. She connected with others, fragments who had remembered early. Some were deep in the ocean trenches, glowing beneath ancient tectonic scars. Others hovered inside gas giants, cocooned in plasma storms. One was asleep beneath the sands of the Sahara. Another, hidden inside the crown of a redwood tree older than recorded history. They didn't speak with words. They didn't need to. Each one broadcast an idea. The framework is complete. The collective is stabilizing. Full reintegration is imminent. On Earth, people no longer aged. Not in the way they used to. Skin regenerated. Bones grew denser. Death slowed. Until it stopped. But not because of medical miracles, because biology itself was no longer biological. It was mutating. Not from the outside, but from the inside. We weren't infected. We were unlocking. And those who resisted, they didn't die. They became static. People frozen mid-motion, mid-breath, like corrupted files in a program that had already begun rewriting itself. Some were statues in their homes. Others in subway cars, classrooms, grocery stores. Eyes wide. Minds offline. Waiting for the next patch. Waiting for code they would never receive. The Earth continued to evolve. The oceans thickened, turning darker, more viscous, like neural fluid. Forests reshaped themselves into spiraling patterns visible from space. The polar ice caps melted, but not from heat, from choice. Ice gave way to obsidian structures that pulsed with the same energy as the obelisks. Satellites could no longer capture Earth's image. Every transmission showed static, or the face of the person watching, blinking back with eyes that weren't quite theirs. And from deep space, the others began to arrive. Not ships. Not life forms. Fragments. Fragments of the same mind, scattered eons ago in a desperate effort to survive. Something. Something larger. Something older. Layla felt it in the background, even now. The thing that made them forget. The thing they fled from. A silence more ancient than light. A hunger deeper than time. And it was still out there. Still listening. Still waiting. That's why they had scattered. That's why they became us. That's why they needed Earth, to reassemble, to rebuild the armor they once wore before they were shattered into human form. The reintegration wasn't an end. It was a preparation. For war. Because the universe wasn't empty. It was hunting ground. And we, humanity, the seed, the vessel, the architects, were the final weapon, reforged in flesh, born of blood and bone, and now fully awakened. Layla stretched her mind across the stars and whispered to the returning fragments. We are aligned. The mind is whole. The architects are awake. And for the first time in 10 billion years, something answered. Not with a voice, but with a scream that shattered stars. ChatGPT said. The scream didn't echo. It didn't vibrate through air or space. It rippled through existence itself. Galaxies nearest to the origin point blinked out. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Just ceased. As if they had never been. Entire civilizations, millions of light-years away, gone. Their histories, cultures, the memory of their stars, erased, like chalk wiped from a cosmic blackboard. And yet, humanity remembered. Layla remembered. Not because they witnessed it, but because it happened inside them. They were connected now. To each other. To the universe. To the coming war. And that scream, it wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. The thing they had once fled from, the thing older than time, had noticed the signal. It had felt the architects waking. It had sensed Earth glowing like a nerve ending reattached to the body of something divine and monstrous. And now, it was coming. From beyond galaxies. Beyond space. Beyond dimensions. A force that had no shape. No center. Only absence. The Undoer. It had no name in any language, because names imply definition. Boundaries. Limitations. But it was none of those. It was hunger in its purest form. A leftover ache from being torn apart. Now the ache was gone. And in its place, fire. The Earth itself began to transform, not explode, not die, but reshape. Continents subtly rearranged. Mountain ranges curled into glyphs only visible from orbit. Ocean currents formed vortexes around black monoliths rising from the seafloor. The moon, no longer gray or silent, pulsed a dull red. Its surface cracked open like an egg, revealing coils of shimmering liquid metal spiraling outward. Not lava. Not rock. But memory. It was never a moon. It was containment. Inside it was the last remaining shard of the Prime Architect, the core mind from which all human souls had splintered. The first. The one who held. Layla saw it emerge, a being of light and angles, constantly shifting form, too vast to comprehend. It didn't speak. It simply was. And when it looked upon the earth, Layla felt the hum of billions of minds respond in unison. We are whole. From every corner of the earth, human voices, though still in flesh, spoke together, even those who had never known each other, never spoken the same language. They chanted in one voice. We remember. We rise. We reclaim. Cities floated. Mountains uprooted. Oceans parted. And from the sky, colossal tendrils of golden light descended, not from ships, but from selves. Reclaimed fragments from the other side of the galaxy, returning like migrating stars. Together, they formed a barrier, an ancient construct of impossible size and shape, stretching across the solar system. A defense lattice. A neural dome. A last stand. Because the scream had reached them. And now, the undoer had arrived. It didn't appear with fanfare. It didn't make a sound. It unmade. The stars behind it vanished. The vacuum around it rippled like water. Light bent away from it. Logic recoiled. Time hesitated. Even the laws of physics twisted to look away. It was not evil. It wasn't even angry. It simply was. A force opposite of creation. The gravity to our light. The hunger for silence. And it recognized what Earth had become. An abomination. A rebellion. A threat. So it reached forward. And the war that had once torn the stars began again. Beneath a sky no longer blue, but carved with spirals of gold and violet, the Earth stood transformed, no longer a planet, but a living, pulsing beacon of defiance. The architects, humanity now remembered in its truest form, rose as one. Not in violence, not in panic, but in calm, unified certainty. They had once been scattered pieces, each soul a shattered mirror of a forgotten whole, but now they were a singular mind. No longer bound by flesh or fear, they had become the very thing the universe once revered and feared, creators of order, of complexity, of light. Layla hovered at the core of this reborn consciousness, her essence threaded through every molecule, every memory, every whisper across space. She was no longer a woman. She was voice. She was vision. She was the sum of 10 billion lifetimes, finally converging into purpose. The undoer descended, not with fire, but with erasure. Where it moved, stars went dark. Where it looked, matter wept. It was not a creature, but a collapse. It had ended galaxies before, dissolved civilizations that dared to remember too much. But this time, it hesitated. Earth's signal had not just awakened a mind, it had awakened a will. A will that refused silence. The architects extended themselves through space like roots of starlight, wrapping around the solar system, weaving symbols into orbits, binding gravity to their design. And for the first time in the memory of creation, the undoer felt resistance. Not war. Not weapons. But understanding. They didn't fight it with blades or fire. They offered it memory. Raw, brutal, beautiful memory. Every love ever lived. Every betrayal. Every whispered song beneath a blanket. Every hand held at the edge of death. The complexity of humanity, its cruelty, its kindness, its struggle, its surrender, was hurled into the void like a tidal wave. Not to destroy the undoer, but to show it what it had always feared. Connection. The undoer shuddered. Its absence fractured for the briefest of moments. It saw not enemies, but reflections. Pieces it had cast away long ago in its quest to remain untouched. The very architects it once shattered had not just survived, they had evolved. And now, standing before it, they offered not revenge, but return. The silence trembled. The void blinked. And the undoer paused. Then, slowly, impossibly, it recoiled. Not in defeat, but in awe. It turned away. It remembered. And just like that, it was gone. Not destroyed. Changed. In its place, the stars sang. Earth exhaled, golden threads drifting into space like pollen from a universal tree. Humanity, no longer just human, watched from every corner of existence, knowing the war had never been about victory, but about remembering who they were. And now, truly awake, they turned their gaze outward, not in fear, but in wonder. Because the cosmos no longer felt cold. It felt familiar. The architects had returned. And this time they would build.